So dirty experiments. Whole talk is around experimenting on shoestring traffic and resources. Does this work? Yes. So I work for Teletext. I'm head of conversion over there. Just by a show of hands, if I say the word Teletext, what are your first thoughts? Hands up if your first thoughts are, who are they? And hands up if your first thought is, they're still around. Okay, so unfortunately for those of you whose first thought is they're still around, you guys are really old. Really, really old. And for those of you whose first thought is, who are they, you're either really young or you're not English. So that's the only way I can describe Teletext. So Teletext is a text-based service that we used to get through our TVs. It was before the internet, kind of. It did cross over, but people still used it, old people, my dad. On there, you could check you could check the news, check TV guides, weather, lottery, and travel. So this is what Teletext holidays used to look like. I'd be lying if I said this is how it still looks. This is what it still looks like. I wish it still looked like this. I feel like my company's missing a trick by not tapping into the nostalgic value of Teletext holidays. So this is Teletext holidays now. These two images were taken at, the screenshots were taken at 2 different times. We do have consistent user journeys across the site. I took them at different times. So we've heard a lot today. I think Holly's point around being right and being alone is something we've all been there. I'm usually wrong and alone, which is it's an even lonelier place to be. So experiments, huh? Sort of glad Holly has gone now, just because I'm going to reference Microsoft for a quick second. So these are the big players. These are the guys you hear about all the time. These are the guys who are always publishing articles, and they have their Medium pages, and they're talking about experimentation. Amazon, as Jeff Bezos talks about experimentation a lot. Google obviously is a cultural experimentation. Facebook and Microsoft, maybe even Twitter. I don't know. But yep, okay, I'm getting a nodding head there. But that's all right. They're very big. They're very big sites. They've got a lot of traffic. They have a lot of resources. This is a slide I lifted from a conference that happened last week. Making the business case for large-scale experimentation. I mean, come on. Who here's got small-scale experimentation down to tell you that they're having to worry about large-scale experimentation? I think, from my opinion, it's still a nice to have. Marketing still dominates the budgets. They still get majority of budgets, and rightly so. Right? Marketing teams can tell you down to the pound, to the penny, what the return on the investment is for the budgets they get allocated. And here, we're still here dicking around with confidence intervals and annualized, theoretical annualized uplifts, and we're hanging our hat on win rates. So, there's definitely a difference here, and I think rightly so, marketing teams usually get the budgets. Then you have stuff like this, right? Again, taken from the same conference, someone posted this. 3/4 of the companies surveyed reported that their digital revenue increased by over 5% because of experimentation. I'm not going to, so the sample size on this is what, 808? I'm not going to believe that unless someone can tell me that all 808 of those people were in the finance team, right? And these aren't numbers provided by the guy who has the relationship, or girl who has the relationship with the A/B testing company tool that you use. When they do that research, saying, hey, how much value are we adding to your company? So, oh yeah, 5%. I'd like to see that in the. I'd like to see that from a finance team. But my point is that's a lot of pressure on people who have to worry about traffic and resources. Right, and just to kind of add some context onto this. So first of all, what are the challenges of low traffic and resources? Well, volume, length, and quantity, and I'll talk about these. Volume being, given the low traffic that we have, I say low traffic, by clinical trial standards, we still have magnitudes more of people who we can experiment on, but we're dealing with such small changes in behavior that actually, even though we get 1 million visitors to the site a month, it's still not enough. Length, because we're looking for just such marginal changes in our conversion rates, we need to run the test for a lot longer. And then quantity of tests you can run on any given page, journey, just again because of the fact that we don't have that the high volumes of traffic. So to give an example, so this data is actually taken from SimilarWeb, so I'm not going to validate whether it's right or wrong, but according to SimilarWeb, Teletext gets 1.63 million visits in this given time range I was looking at. Just to give you an example of scale, Booking.com, who are a booking site, gets 636 million. So we're talking 600, almost 600 times the amount of traffic that we get. That's 0.25% of traffic that teletext get and Booking versus Booking.com. Booking.com are usually seen as one of those companies who really have testing nailed down. You know, Lucas Vermeer and all those guys, they're talking about thousand experiments they run. They've got 600 times the traffic. On a slightly smaller scale, one of our direct competitors, Love Holidays. Again, I don't know if these numbers are right or not, but if they are right, you know, that's still 6 times the traffic that we get, 6-7 times the traffic that we get, which means they can still run 6-7 times the volume of tests that we want to do. And keep in mind, this is site-wide traffic. So if you're testing on a particular page or a particular journey, that's going to be a fraction of that, right? So I want you to keep that in mind in terms of traffic volumes. Then we talk about conversion rates. So typical conversion rates for most sites is about 5%. This is a finger in the air job. I just assumed based on a few companies I've worked at. Plus or minus 4% either side. But I imagine most people wouldn't disagree with me when I say the conversion rate for most companies somewhere between 1% and 9-10%, depending on what you do. That's really small, right? So when we're talking about trying to convert that conversion, we're never really going to double it, right? We're talking about slightly increasing it, slightly moving it, and really just swinging that conversion rate, you know, plus or minus by a couple of percentage points. So what I've done is I've taken some data. This is some pre-experiment analysis I did at a previous company. Good luck trying to guess which company because I've removed everything from it. But I was trying to look at how long a test would have to run to see a 2% conversion rate. Now that only equated to 0.14% of increase or decrease on our overall conversion rate, which meant I needed a sample size of roughly 800,000 sessions or users, which based on this particular journey that I was looking at would have taken me 170 days. Now, for those of you who've never done sample size calculation, you might ask the question, well, why do you look at 2%? Why don't you look at 8% and try and move the needles like 0.5% more than what you already have? Realistically, I don't think many people have moved their conversion rate by 0.5%, 1%, 2%. I saw a number recently that said it was a case study from a client success manager who was showcasing some of their clients' work, and they saw a 93% increase in conversion. So just for a second, let's stop and think about 93% increase in conversion, all right? You earn 100 grand a year, or a million pounds a year. You've almost doubled that to 2 million in terms of revenue, right? Almost. Or you've got 1 million customers and you've almost doubled that to 2 million customers, right? It's really not possible. And even if on the fluke that you do happen to increase your conversion rate by 93%, the chances of you doing it again is really slim. So realistically, whenever you're running tests, you're looking at sample sizes and percentage swings of roughly around this much, and even an 8% conversion rate is hard to achieve. So when I do pre-experiment analysis, and hopefully if you guys are still doing frequentist statistics, you're usually looking at 2, 3, 4% conversion when you're trying to determine your sample sizes and trying to see if you can get it down to a testable duration. But if we did leave it like that, this is what we're going to end up looking like. So you're going to be waiting a long time to see a 2% improvement in your conversion. And then so that's the second thing. So we've got your traffic volumes and you've got your conversion. Then you've got the quantity of tests you can run on any given journey, on any given page. In an ideal situation, if we think about clinical trials and they're more in the more traditional sense, you'd normally have a control group who are given a placebo, and you give them a treatment of some type. So you give them a pill or something like that, and you try and reduce the effect of diarrhea or something by 30% or something. I was using a crap analogy there, just those of you paying attention. But you'd run one test, right? Now, in an ideal situation, this would also be a clear glass of beer. But because we're dealing with website traffic, we have confounding variables hitting our website all the time. We have marketing change, we have pricing changes across the site. Now, this would normally be controlled for by randomization, but we still have all of these. Those of you who work in the travel sector will have known that Thomas Cook recently went out of business. That massively skewed our numbers, and that's something we didn't account for, but it had an impact on us because a lot of our customers were flying through Thomas Cook, so we had to suddenly help all of these people. Then, then ideally, second best scenario, probably want to run a few tests across your website. So you can still, when you're looking at the data, you can still try and control for it and try and clean it before you analyze it. Multiple tests, your water starts to get a little bit muddier. And then if you're running multiple tests across multiple pages, it starts to become really hard to clean this and understand which test is having what impact where. But yeah, so in an ideal world, you'd run one test and then see the impact of that. The next challenge that companies with smaller traffic volumes usually have is resources. So again, in an ideal world, if you think about Microsoft, if you think about Facebook, Google, they're going to have an entire team to support them. They're going to have analysts, researchers, optimizers, developers, designers, data scientists, product managers, UX folks. People just come up with ideas, like, hey, this would be cool. You'd have executive buy-in, copywriters and QA team, and probably a good coffee machine, all right? That's me. I have one person working on conversion, that's me. I have one analyst doing the analysis for the company, that's me. It's not complete like that. There is a BI team in India, but for argument's sake, let's rule them out. But that's a lot of people I have to compete against, and then this is essentially what it feels like. So to quote a friend of mine, this image is banned in China. Hey, Michael. It really does sometimes feel like you're one person, you're up against a tank of companies who have these unlimited traffic and unlimited resources. You're asked to compete against, and you're benchmarked against them. So how do you overcome this? It's really a difficult challenge. So I want to leave you with my first thought. At core, we're marketers, we're not scientists. So when we think about running experimentation on a website, we don't have to worry about adverse effects on the patients that we're running clinical trials on. You might piss someone off, give them a bad experience, but ultimately you're not going to ruin their lives, right? You might give them a sour taste in their mouth and they might tweet about it, but that is it, worst case scenario, right? So we're marketers, we're really not scientists. That means we can take more risks, we can muddy the water, we can dabble in other fields, we can fudge the statistical rigor of our tests, and we can make quicker decisions. Keeping in mind, most decisions prior to this kind of like big data generation that we're in were made with very little data or no data, right? And people did really well succeeding out of the back of that. We're sort of hiding behind data and that's crippling our ability to make decisions. So let's go back to the challenges and see how we can exploit them. So number fudging, I like number fudging. Going back to the same table I was talking about earlier, who can tell me how we can get that 170 days down to a more respectable timeline? 90% confidence. Who's that? 90% confidence. 90% confidence. Anything else?
Your baseline conversion might swing about.
Alan?
Do a one-sided test instead of double-sided test.
Yeah, I mean, you're all right. Or you can reduce the power, right? So there are risks associated with this, but essentially you modify some of this stuff, right? You modify your confidence intervals, you modify your statistical power, you can do one-sided tests against two-sided tests, and that will bring it down. So again, going back to that example, what we did was we definitely weren't going to wait for 170 days, and we definitely weren't going to see more than a 2, 3, 4% increase in the numbers we were looking at. It's genuinely true. Actually, the test tanked, and we realized we fucked up really bad, and we were able to conclude the test in 7 days. But it was we didn't think that was going to happen. Find me after, I'll tell you what that test was. So essentially, we reduced that confidence to 90%, and we lowered that statistical power down to 70%, and we reduced that, the length required for us to be able to run this test to 90 days. Now, you've got to be careful when you're doing this. You've really got to understand what the implications are of reducing these numbers. So you've gone from a 5% chance of your results being random to a 10% chance. That's a type 1 error. So when you drop 95% to 90%, you increase your type 1 error rates. Then you've gone from a 20% chance of missing an effect to a 30% chance of missing an effect, which is a type 2 error. So what that means is, let's try and give you some context. You run a test, for say for example, the type 2 error. You run a test, you decide within 30 days it hasn't reached the statistical significance that you were hoping for. You were hoping for 5%, and maybe you're seeing a 2%. If you call that test too early, it could be that there is a difference, but you needed longer to run that. You increase that risk of not being able to spot that difference. And then from the first one, you declare a winner and you roll out a feature, but it may not actually be a winner, and it could be inconclusive, or worse still, it could have been detrimental to your overall conversion rate. So, but you've got to be aware of this when you make these decisions. If traditional stats fail you, there's other methods you can look at. So you can look at new fancy statistical methods. So on the left-hand side here, it wasn't that hard, just left, right, yeah. On the left-hand side here, you've got Bayesian statistics. So you can run your numbers through a Bayesian statistical calculator and get some type of insights in terms of whether there is a difference or not, and you can do that fairly early. The risk with this one is that the test, if you do it too early, that test is massively underpowered, right? So you really are running a risk of type 1 errors. I'll come back to on that one. Alternatively, something I've recently been studying a lot of is sequential hypothesis analysis, sequential testing analysis. Forget the words for it. And what this is as the sample size increases, your Z values for your tests can start to get lower and lower until they approach that 95% confidence. So in the early days, you can still run a test, but you'd have to see magnitudes of difference between your tests to be able to validate that. Whereas as you suddenly start to get to 20K, 30K, 40K, 50K, you can drop that Z value slightly, but you can look for those smaller, but you can more confidently say that any small differences are probably powered. I won't go into too much detail on that. I do a lot of reading, so that's my punishment and my reward. If you guys want to learn more about this, you'll have to do it yourself. So we talked about traffic, we talked about percentages. The other thing you can do is fuck it, just do multiple tests on a single page. But be really conscious about the test you're doing. So use your intuition, but don't trust it. I'll come back to this one. Make conscious crossovers. If you are testing something at the top of the page, be sure that whatever else you're testing on the page isn't going to conflict with that test, right? Be really, really mindful of the tests you're running on the same page. Use mutual exclusivity when necessary. Sometimes it may be necessary to exclude people in test 1 to test and test 2. For example, if you're testing pricing and you're testing shipping, you don't want to lower the price on one side of the journey and then increase shipping on the other side. So be really mindful of that. Use mutual exclusivity then. And then find ways to unmuddy the water during your analysis. You guys have access to loads and loads of data now, so you should be able to go into Google Analytics, your whatever A/B testing tool you're using to try and unmuddy some of those waters to be able to get these results faster. And again, when you present your findings back, be conscious of the fact that there is an element of muddiness in that data, but don't let it hinder you from making decisions. Actually, sorry. I've got some tests running on this page right now as we speak. Any guesses for how many tests I'm running on this page right now? I'm not going to say what they are, but I will verify the quantity of tests I'm running on this page. 3? Yeah, 3. No, it's 3. I'm not going to run my 12 tests. That's just be ridiculous even for me. But no, I'm running 3 tests right now. But I've made sure that they're not going to conflict in any way whatsoever. And even if they do, it won't conflict the same numbers and the KPIs that I'm tracking and measuring. Resources. So that was a bit about the numbers. I spent a lot of time last year talking about numbers, so I won't spend too much time talking about it today. You can't fudge the numbers to help you on your resources problem. You need to get out of your comfort zone here. So Tom's not here today, but Tom's been coaching me recently. I say recently, last sort of like 6 or 7 weeks, to do research. So Holly was talking about doing research and going out and talking to people. I really hate talking to people, despite I don't mind this, but I don't like talking to customers. But because of some coaching and getting out of my comfort zone, I've now done focus groups, I've now done diary studies, and I've run a customer journey workshop. Albeit it was internal with people in the company, but got me into doing things I've never done before. So and off the back of that, actually, we found 40 new test ideas and UI fixes, and this is just internal. Like God knows how many we'd find if we went to customers. So that's how you not replace your researchers and UXers, but you can suddenly start to fill some of these gaps that you might have in your own team. Copywriters, this is an actual test. Read the content on your site. Does the language sound internal? The amount of times we deal with internal languages, but we don't think about how that might affect how customers might speak. So if you're dealing with international markets, we say discount codes, but they might say coupon codes. Subtle changes. I changed the result. I changed some copy on a particular page I was testing, and our interaction with that module went from 12% to 17%, and we saw a 45% uplift in interactions, not conversions, just interactions. But it just went to show that actually the language we were using was completely wrong. So if you don't have copywriters, try to at least yourself read the content on your website. How many of you guys read the content on your website? Like really read the content on your website? There you go, right? So I didn't either until I didn't have a choice. People with ideas and analysts. Okay, so I'm an analyst, so it's okay, I can do this. But if you're not an analyst, think about what the type of questions you might ask your analyst, and you'll find you can come up with ideas. So use the site as a customer, as a starting point. Make a purchase. Go through the journey. Put yourself in the shoes and see if anything doesn't make sense. Challenge everything you see, and then try to quantify it through testing and analysis. And hopefully you'll see that you can start coming up with your own test ideas. Or if you're thinking like an analyst, start questioning the value of everything on your page. So, how much value does this add? And what I mean value is how many people are interacting with it. Do people who interact with it versus people who don't interact with it? Is there a difference in their behavior, in their metrics? So, people who modify search are people who are refining their search, doing something different to customers who've nailed their search first time round, et cetera, et cetera. Product managers. If you're fortunate enough to work with product managers, then you don't have to worry about this, but I'm not. So I've got to think often. I've got to really think like a product manager. I'm often told, test everything. Optimize all of these A/B testing companies will say, test this, test this, test this, test this, test this. But when you're faced with the challenges of limited traffic, limited resources, you genuinely can't test everything. So this is where a product manager, thinking like a product manager, helps. A product manager doesn't waste time on low impact features actually, but so likewise you shouldn't be wasting your time on low impact tests. And then test your tests, right? Like, again, you may not have the benefit of a QA team at your disposal, so test everything that goes out. When someone tells you, the test is ready for deployment, go through and follow that test. Every single way a customer could potentially interact with that test. Force yourself into the control group, into the variation group, and see what you find. And you'll find bugs, because all of these things will impact your results. And when you are up against massive traffic volumes, every day you lose on testing counts. And it won't always go right, so these are some of my skeletons. This is the time I lost the company 25 grand. So particularly proud of this one. But we learned something, and this was a classic one, like, hey, we should lower our prices and we'll see conversion go up. We did, we lowered our prices for the next size up in the pack, and rightly so, the people who are looking at the lowest quantities, shifted into the higher quantities. But when we did the cumulative revenue analysis, we started off great, then minus 25K, right? And then we ran simulations, like, okay, I think Holly talked about iterations. I could have run this test again through, modifying that price slightly, so not decreasing as much as I did, but it didn't make sense. I could have run simulations under, these are best case scenarios, right? So if I lower the price on something, but I don't lower as much as this, I'm not going to see the same type of conversion rate. So under those conversions, I ran those simulations, and actually I found in order for it to even break even, the price needed to be exactly the same or just slightly under. So it made sense, okay, well, why are we lowering the price? And we went the other way. We increased the price and we won. I won't say we won, the test won, and actually that was then rolled out. The new pricing strategy was rolled out across that set of products, not across the site. This is my favorite experiment. This is my Schrodinger's cat. The page on the left is both better and worse than the page on the right. Right? This goes to show, and what I mean by that is I tested these two journeys under two different circumstances. So I used two different traffic sources, or mediums and channels, and I found in one channel, the page on the left worked better, and on the other channel, I found the page on the right worked better. So when you are thinking about blanket journeys, keep in mind that there will be instances where one journey works better than the other, and ideally what you want to do is you want to maximize, and that is if you can't have tailored journeys, what you want to do is you want to maximize the impact you have from one of those landing pages, and you want to pick the one that's going to have the best impact. So this is my Schrodinger's cat test. I really haven't figured this one out, actually. What do I want to say about this one? Oh, yeah. Cut short. So I know we talk about letting tests run and statisticals. You got something to say? No, just joking. We talked about statistical significance and sample size calculations and power analysis and all that shit. Sometimes you have to cut your losses, right? I know best practice and statistical rigor and blah, blah, blah stipulates that you need to let the test run through to completion if you're using traditional frequentist methods. Fuck that shit, right? Literally, if it looks like it's losing and it's not winning and you need that page to test something else, fuck it, cancel it and cut it short and just and move on. Maybe iterate and try to understand what happened, but if you need the resources, don't be afraid to cut short. So, I wanted to leave you guys with just some final thoughts. You can't compete on quantity of tests to the big players by playing by their rules. They have the traffic, they have the resources, right? When you don't have that, you need to moneyball the game a bit. Get your hands dirty, become a jack of many trades, try to fill in the gaps by pitching in. That's not to say you can replace them. I'm not standing here saying I can replace an entire researcher, a research analyst or a product manager or a UX designer, but I'm trying to level the playing field by just walking in those shoes once in a while. Be ruthless with your tests, declare early winners, and don't be afraid to cut your losses. The whole point of statistics is to quantify uncertainty. That doesn't mean you have to be 99% confident. Just because the weather forecast shows 70% chance of rain doesn't mean it's not going to rain. 70% chance of sun doesn't mean it's not going to rain. It just means you take that decision not to take an umbrella with you. So, sorry, this was from Friday, and I thought I didn't have enough time. So that was my talk, essentially. Follow me on Twitter. I'm trying to get to 1,000 followers. How can I hack the system, Jess?